Welcome to another exciting mystery solving video. In this one, we're going to solve and explain the mystery of Tula, which is a pyramid site in Mexico, which has Atlantean figures standing on the top. Notice that it is 10 degrees east of Easter Island, which has all the moai on them. There we have Easter Island, and it is 10 degrees east. We zoom in down here and take a look at the site. What I'm going to do is give you a few clues. Clues before I tell you the truth about this site and what it means, who made it, and why. So the first thing we need to do is drop a man down here and let's take a look around. Okay, so on the north side you see all these columns, and up there is the Atlantean figures, and you can see the rough texture of the sides. Now these two pyramids here are roughly the same height, 10 meters tall, and this one is also flat topped. So all three of these are flat topped. Now I'm suspicious that this is another pyramid and the rest of it is underground. If this central plaza is underground, that would make it 7.87 meters below ground and 7 feet above ground. And 78 has this green freshness, father of help. And in Greek, 78, 79 is ignorant, and to be ignorant, son of ignorance. So that there is another clue. This flat surface here, it's 7 meters below ground, 7 feet above ground. If you measure the width and the length, it's 7 meters by 7 meters by 7 meters by 7 meters. It is also from the North Pole, from Tula to the North Pole, over the Earth, it is also 7,777 kilometers. This platform is also, there's another 777 measurement, which I can't share with you right now because that'll give it away. This spot to the equator is also 72,000 arc seconds from the equator. Do you see this pyramid here? This pyramid, if you calculate its volume, it is 23,331 cubic meters. Now, why is that interesting? Because that happens to be 7777 times 3. Now, the angle to the North Pole is also 70 degrees. Here it is 70 degrees. So what I'm trying to demonstrate is the number of times 7777 comes up when you study this little platform here. Now also, if we consider this to be the tip of a box. Now if we take Tula and we put it on the edge of the Earth's circumference, if you created a box and put a box in, and that is your top corner, basically this is what you have. Now what's interesting is that the box that it forms has a ratio of 2.74. That's very interesting because the Earth's diameter is 27,400,000 royal cubits. So this box's ratio matches the Earth's curvature. Now what's also interesting is that that just so happens to be matching the moon's sidereal month. If you view the Earth and the moon from the stars, that's the number of days. 274 is the number of days it takes for the moon to go around the Earth once. So basically it's saying 360. That's what it's trying to say, and that 360 is another major part of the clue. I thought that the bottom location would be Easter Island, but it's not. It actually misses by 7 degrees, and there's the 7 comes up again. And it misses by a distance of 783 kilometers. That's very close to the 787 we just looked at, the distance between the ground level and the base underground of the pyramid. Now, because of the moon idea, I thought I'd do a little study on the moon, and I've added it into this video at the end. We'll come back to this in the end. But what I want to demonstrate, there is a moon, I wouldn't say alignment. Alignment's not the right word, but there is a moon play here. Because the angle with the North Pole is 70 degrees, that is 3 times the Earth's tilt. Now because of that, the moon has a play. And what happens is, when it reaches, now 86.7 is the angle measured from the moon. But if you measure it from the Earth, basically what's happening is when it does 13 sweeps around the Earth, on the 13th sweep, it reaches its maximum or its lowest 66 degrees. Now that 66 lines up with the Earth's tilt angle. So these are interesting measurements which we'll come back to later on in the video. First, let's cover everything on the Earth. These shells have also been discovered in the area, and they are like a conch. In other words, you blow in it and it makes a sound. So let's continue looking around this site to see what else we can discover, what's going on here. Now, if you look carefully, you can see that these walls here look very rough and broken. It's like there's broken walls around here. That's another clue. If you come up here, do you see the rough texture on the sides of these pyramids? That's giving you an indication, and that is another clue. Here we can see these guys. Now these guys, they have poles in their hands, they have breastplates, they have feathers on their heads, there's spears, there's a disc on their backs, and in the front of them here, there is these round posts. Now, this has a serpent going around it. There's a round serpent on a pole. These are all clues. Okay, this is a much better view. So there is the 7x7x7 plaza in the middle, and you can see how it's like squared off. It's like if you come down these steps, you can either go up those steps, or so if you stepped off there and you walked up here and you didn't make it to the top, you climbed 14 steps, you didn't make it, so what do? You come down again, you have to come this way. So you come this way and you walk up, and this is the time you get up to a flat surface. Now let me ask you, what happens to you when you walk up these steps? You are rising, and then you level off onto a flat surface, and that is a clue to this site. And down here you have all these square and circular posts. Now it looks like somebody's only done a half plastering. They haven't finished plastering. Now plaster is another clue. So what we also have the rough, you see the rough texture of these walls. So what is it speaking about? Now, if we have a top view of all these columns for a moment, if we zoom in and look at these columns, okay, so do you see how there are two rows of square going round and round, round and round, round and round? If you walk into the top channel, you kind of get fed through 4 and 4, so it's 8. And then you go round once, round twice, round 3 times, and you come out of here, you kind of get fed back in again. So then you go 4, 5, 6. So you go through these circles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you come out here, and the last one is, so you could say you've followed this 7 times. Now over here, in front of this flat-topped pyramid, you have 3 rows of 14 each. 14, 14, and 14 is 42. And that matches the number of steps you got going up here to this flat top pyramid. Now, if you have a look at the angle, do you see how it's at an angle? Now, they are facing 18 degrees. If you measure this angle is 18 degrees. So they're 18 degrees west of south. So that means how many degrees do they have to turn to face east? 90 plus 18 is 108. 108 can be found again if you measure the perimeter of this top flat platform. So if you go there and you right click and you say measure distance and you go once, 27 by 27 by 27 by 27, which should be 108. So that there is a numerical match. So what is the story pointing us towards? What is going on here? The marching around here, do you see the dot, 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 dot? It's very much like a millipede. When a millipede walks, it leaves behind a dot, 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 dot. And that's another clue. It's like there's a procession and it's walking, it's moving, or it's marching. That's what it's trying to say. So what is the clue? What is actually going on here? Marching, marching, marching. Round. Blowing horn. And it's all about Jericho. The 7 priests shall bear this ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns. And the 7th day ye shall encompass the city 7 times. How the 7 priests, the 7th circuit, the 7 blasts with a trumpet on the 7th day. So the wall fell down flat. So the people went up into the city, straight before him, and they took the city. Is that not what happens when you walk up the side of the pyramid, up the steps, and you level off onto the flat surface? There it says in the Bible, you will walk up, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him. So if you measure the distance between Tula, this site, and Jericho, you get 3.04% of the earth's surface. And that 304 matches 12 steps. So these are the Levite priests that carried the Ark of the Covenant. You can see they have a 4:3 ratio on the size. Look at the size of the breastplate. It has a 4:3 ratio. And in the Bible, this is exactly how it's laid out. 4:3, 4 rows of stones. Now these are the names of the stones that's in the Bible, and how there should be one for each tribe, and there's 12 tribes. In the story along the wilderness journey, God tells Moses to take all the people that were bowing down to Baal, put them to death. So later on, Phinehas sees one of these evil people go into this tent with this woman. So he picks up a spear, walks in, and kills them both. Spear is Hebrew number 2021. Spear could also be considered a stave or a javelin. And this is what the poles that were to pick up the Ark of the Covenant. In regards to 2021, we do see 1, 2, 0, and 2. So we've got 202. I wonder if there's not one missing. Liters, volume in liters. Ark of the Covenant. Now, if you include the distance in hands above the ground depth in meters, 787 plus 21 is 808. Now, in regards to the sick man turning and facing the serpent pole and holding the honeypot, if you calculate the volume of these posts, in volume, it's 118.3 homers, or 4,026 liters. So this leads us to this idea of 7, 7, and 4. 7 priests, 7 trumpets, and the 4 ark frame, which sums to 18. We also have a measurement here of 45, which is the Greek term anchor. And what it is, how that is parallel with the Jericho story, is that it's a fixed, stable witness around the holy summit. Now, do you see these counts here? We have 444, the platform shaped perimeter of, we come out here. All right. This eye shape over here, if you measure the perimeter, this one here is 150 meters. And this one here, I get a measurement of 444. We also have a 5444 and 4224. 4244. And that brings us to these passages of Deuteronomy 4 verse 44, where, and this is the law which Moses set before the children of Israel. Okay. So do you see how these posts, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 2, 4. So you got 4, 4, 2, and 4. And the front ones, if you look carefully, here we have 5. You see there's a split there? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we got 5, 4, 4, 4 for the front posts. And at the back, we've got 4, 4, 2, 4. Now, the Chacmool guy, there's this guy here called the Chacmool. And he's lower down. He's at the bottom of these steps here somewhere. Okay, where is he? Okay, he's over here. If we can get a clear image of it. I think somebody's broken his head off. Or it's just the images. Oh, I can't find him. Where? Oh, there. Here he is, the Chacmool guy. Now, Chacmool, he's lame. He's sick. He's lame and sick. And that's why he's on his backside. Now, he wants to be healed. So he holds the honeypot, the golden honeypot on his belly. And what does he do? He turns and faces the serpent so he can be healed. So that's further captured in Hebrews 9 about the golden honeypot had the manna. So do you see how his head is turned at 90 degrees and he's facing south? So there it says, when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. Now, what's interesting is that 787, which is a number that came up earlier, this gap, 7-degree gap of the box, and the 787 is the Hebrew number for wall. And it's the Jericho wall that stopped the Israelites from entering Jericho. Now, the distance from Tula to the Earth's equator is 72,228. 722 is the Greek number for the high priests, which the Levites who carried the Ark of the Covenant were. If we calculate the volume of the pyramid, I get to roughly 15,000 cubic meters. When you take that and you use the key numbers from the story, as in the 7s, the 13, because they marched around the city 13 times, and they had 42 station stops along the journey, we can come out using those numbers to these very passages, where it speaks specifically of the sanctuary. Tabernacle was a big part of the journey with the Ark of the Covenant. Now, looking at the plaza in the center, it's 7 by 7, which is 49 square meters. And the Hebrew number 49 is a priestly girdle, or sash, which is what they wore. The high priests had to wear in the tabernacle and around the Ark of the Covenant. So to continue looking at the characteristics and the features of the Atlantean figures, 27, 27, 27 summed is 108. In Deuteronomy 10 verse 8, there it says, "At a time the Lord separated the tribe of Levi to bear the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord." So here is a direct match with the whole carrying of the Ark of the Covenant story. So 10 cubits high these guys are 4.6 meters tall. 4.6, if you convert it to common cubits, it's 10 cubits. And there it speaks of 2 cherubims of the olive tree, each 10 cubits high. Now the mercy seat can also be found in the measurements of the site. The wings of the cherubim, there it speaks of the cherubim shall stretch out forth their wings, covering the mercy seat. Then I have mentioned this 5444. Now we also have the ark itself made of shittim wood and having 4 rings of gold through it. Now 4424, which is the sequence we have here, 4424, 14 can bring us out to the 14th day, and 50 can bring us out to the 50th year in Leviticus. And this is basically summed. The square register can sum to 50. The 42 plus the 8. Posts are 4.6 meters high, which is 10 cubits. Now if you calculate the volume of the rear square posts, I get 49.21 homers. Homers is a unit of measure they used to use in the Bible times, very long time ago. And that can bring us to these passages where we also have a measurement of 7.03. So the short posts is 7.03 homers. Now that number comes up again in the study. It just demonstrates again number 7, how many times you see it at the site. Now the discs on the back, it said that the circular shape of the wings of the cherubim form this circle, both-sided circle over the mercy seat. And that's captured in these passages. Now the conch and the shells of the story. If you study these shells, do you see this little snake thing going around here? If you count that, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 21 is 3, 7. That's 7 plus 7 plus 7. Now, there was this 7 and 7 priests shall bear the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns. And this is what the shells are meant to depict. So we have an offset value of 117 meters for the central plaza. And converted into feet, it's 384 feet. 384 is trumpet, the Greek number for trumpet. So they blew these trumpets and the walls came tumbling down. Now let's take a look at the column count. So we have these columns. If we take a look at the top view, we can now, let's count these columns and get a good idea of what's going on with them. So we have round columns and square columns. Now the round column represents them going round and round and round. And the square, because let me ask you, what happens to you when you walk into a wall? You have to go left or right. So what have you done? You've turned at 90 degrees. So the 90, 90, 90, the squares, they represent being squared up to a wall and having to turn. Now, if you do your calculations and you do some sums, you get these numbers. Okay, 94, 105, and in the bottom row, there's this total here. You also have 14, 14, 14, which is 42. So we have 39, 42, and 5th columns. So what does it all mean? What I found is 94, if you match these with chapters and verses in the Bible, you come to parts speaking of the ark, speaking of the tabernacle that housed the ark. You come to these passages with 6 days. One of the sums is 88 column, and that lines up exactly with 1 Kings 8 verse 8, where it says, the staves were seen out of the holy place. Now as well, if you do some more calculations, you'll find that you come to these numbers. Now 257 is ark, that's gematria. Hebrew gematria. If you take the Hebrew Strong's number of 727, that can also be calculated by summing everything up. So we have also fire, 784, fire. Now they burnt everything when they entered Jericho. They torched everything. So here we have some extra numbers like wrath. We also have that 4442 is the Greek number for fire. Now if we consider the square versus the round columns, we come out to these numbers, 119, 75, 194, and it brings us to these passages where blessed are the undefiled in the way who walk in the law of the Lord. If we consider using absolute verse index methods, we are brought further out to these passages. 27 brings us to Leviticus 2:10, where it speaks of, and that which is left of the meat offering shall be Aaron's and his sons. So made by fire, the offerings of the Lord. Here we have in the book of Numbers 3 verse 31, and their charge shall be the ark, and the table, and the candlestick, and the altars. 108 brings us out to Joshua 6:10, where it speaks of commanded the people, saying, ye shall not shout or make any noise with your voice. If we take a look at the coordinates on Earth, where Tula is sitting, we can measure the distance to this meridian 0 to get some interesting measurements, and the fact that it is 48 degrees from Easter Island. Using 4,800 in LVS method, these are the journeys of the children which went forth out of the land of Egypt with their armies under the hand of Moses. So that was the very start. 4800 lines up with the very, very start of the wilderness journey, and the first station stop, which was Gilgal. The final stop was Abel Schmitten. Okay, let's continue. Now, if we measure the distance between Tula and Jericho, the real actual place of Jericho, we come out with these measurements. Now, 343 is 7 cubed, and we have a distance of 3,431,600 feet. If we look at the surface distance between Tula and the actual place of Jericho, it's 170, which you could swap around to make 107. So you got God's 10 commandments and the number of the beast. Now, why would that be? Because it's basically God's way of saying he's on top of it and Satan's not going to prevail. The longitude and latitude digits, they sum to 72 and 147. 147 was the lifespan of Jacob, I believe. So we get these other numbers here. 77, another 77 measurement. 48, we digit sum, degrees, minutes, and seconds. Now, 48 is also the number of palms, widths. In other words, you can put your hand around this Ark of the Covenant 48 times. 480 is a number I keep coming back to and studying because I keep finding it. Now 480 is the Hebrew gematria number for the testimony. Now the testimony is what went into the Ark of the Covenant, as in the form of the tablets. Our measurement of 1026 is 19 times 54. 54 Torah portions in the annual cycle. So it's about the ark sitting in the inner chamber. We also have a decimal place of 888, which is Christ's sanctuary ark presence. So 1026 is life times the Torah order and the covenant life enclosure around the ark. So let's take a look at the orientation again. It's 18 degrees west of south. Now if we measure off the actual place of Jericho where it's facing 15 degrees west of south, whereas our location in Tula is 198 degrees west of south. So the difference is exactly 3 degrees. The face-to-face angular difference, 3 degrees. So they blew the trumpets and the wall fell. Now, if you take the 18 degrees, if you take that direction, and you calculate the difference between south, west, north, and east, you get 18, 72, 108, and 162. And each of these numbers have a bearing on the story. Now, it sums to 360. Now, if we sum up, we also get 60. And 360 divided by 60 is 6. So we have this 7, 7, 7, and 6 idea, which is 27, and the 60 aligns with the 60 myriads. When Moses freed the Israelites from Egyptian slavery, there were 600,000 people, or 60 myriads. If we consider these numbers 18, the 72, 108, and 162, I get this idea of the ark procession, the ordered turn toward the wall, and the ark bearing in the Levite support is the 108, and the 162 comes up with this idea with the circuit's completion and return. This location, Abel Schmitten, is the final stop where Moses hands over the reins and they go down, and Joshua then takes the ark to go and defeat the evil people who had taken over the city of Jericho. Abel is H58, but Abel Schmittim is H63. Now, I have a measurement here of 634 inches, or 633 inches. 633 is the height. Measurement of 16 meters is 633, and 6'3" is the final stop name. Then we have 633, the block height. So the Hebrew number 633 is Esar, which is a binding decree. The Greek number for 634 is to fall off. So obstacle drops away. If we actually look at the H633 Esar, that is Gematria 2610. Now 2610, the 2610th verse in the Bible is this one, Exodus 37:5, where it speaks of, and he put the staves into the rings by the sides of the ark to bear the ark. So we have another measurement alignment here with Leviticus 14:8, and there it speaks of, and after that he shall come into the camp and shall tarry abroad out of his tent 7 days. So we have this measurement, the calculation, the alignment, the passage, the meaning, and how we come to 108 degrees. There is a link between our measurements and the orientation. So let's take a look now at the basic site measurements. When we measure the distances between the central locations of each of the major features of the site, one is 300, we have 50, we have 98, we have a border of 850. So there's some interesting measurements here we need to comprehend. Now, just the basic site features, we have the rubble and the rough texture of the pyramids, which designate a fallen wall. We have the plastered stones, we have the smooth summit. We also have a distance between the pyramid and the central plaza, which is 117. And that speaks of, only the Lord thy God will be with thee. So it's about God being with his people, and Joshua with the Ark of the Covenant reclaiming Jericho, one of the most ancient cities that was intended for God's people, not Satan or Baal's people. If we consider the 13 circuits, we have the 7x7 and the 7-foot rise, which is mentioned during these circuits, the 7 priests, 7 trumpets, the 7th day, 7 times. We also have the 3 platforms, 155, which is 11, and 155, Joshua 1:5, there it speaks of, there shall not be any man able to stand before thee. So there is a structure, support, conquest, strength with Jericho, climax family, 12 steps, 12 stones. So the whole site perimeter, 612 meters around there. And 612 in the book of Joshua, that is the verse where the priests took up the ark. I have a measurement here of 2,795 feet. The Greek number 2787 is ark or box, kibotus. We also have a measurement of 169 rods. And the 169th passage in the Bible is, so the ark, Joshua 6 verse 11, so the ark of the Lord compassed the city. We have the eye-shape fields, which is 703 meters. 703 is an interesting number. But Joshua 7:2, this is where it speaks of, and Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai. So this is where the spies go to invest. So the spies are sent into Jericho to see what's going on. Now, the ark goes in front, and the sea, the Jordan Sea, is parted, just like the Red Sea. 480 is also alas or woe, and the Greek number 480 is to oppose and withstand. Again, it's all making parallels with the Jericho story. And we have this Site 17, which is 4 skulls around a burial ground. We'll come back to that. 480 perimeter. We have a 300-meter distance. The 300 may refer to the spine or the straightforward moving theme. We also have a scene where Rahab rescue the sign of the wall. The animal marked a wall, serpent wall boundary imagery. The scarlet red rescue sign belongs to the city wall. The unit root is bridge is visual object, wall boundary plus the scarlet sign, Rahab's scarlet thread in the window. We have an east side perimeter of 2,410. The Greek G2410 is Moon City. So what I've learned is that Jericho was named after the moon, as in the Moon City. Here's a demonstration of how the first plaza is one level sticking out of the ground, and the other 2 pyramids are 5 layers. So we have this 155 theme going on, and it does sound to 11. 11 above ground has this theme of God's might and power. The 15 again prefixes Joshua 6:15, where it speaks on the 7th day they encompassed the city 7 times. We have the 12 steps and the 12 stones alignment. We have a 90-meter angular distance between the plaza, the 90-degree turn at Pyramid B towards Pyramid A. So this brings us to a compassed the city once. And the 2nd day they compassed the city once. So they did 6 days. We also have an 88.8 measurement, which I get. And that can be seen as a 2,000 cubit difference between the sides. If you calculate that from the short cubit measurement scale. The whole site's perimeter of 613, there's an 853 meter, which is 2,795, and 2787 is arc. The 2 eye shapes of 702 is interesting because it lines us up with Joshua 7:2, where it speaks of Joshua sent men from Jericho. Now I think out of all the columns that I've counted, 250, I think I may be short 7. There's 3 that I found on the site which I did not include. So that's 253. I think under the shelters that I cannot see from the satellite image, it should bring us up to 257. I think. I'm suspicious. Now there has been a burial ground discovered on the northern side of this whole site, Tula. And it has 4 skulls. So what is it saying? It's saying that it's like an altar. It's like an offering scene. Now, God instructed the Israelites to make him an offer. In other words, it's a ritual to demonstrate they are with him. The ritual objects arranged around an altar. And it just so happens to also be 480 meters. So this number 480 has come up many, many times. The surface area of the site is also 480 meter perimeter around the whole site. And the altar up, that's 480 meters up north, is at a bearing angle of 85.65 degrees. 86 is Elohim, which is God's name when it comes to judgment. Here we have again another measurement of 480 feet between 2 sides, which is 146. Here's the 480 perimeter. This area here is also 480 square meters in surface area, and the altar with the burial site with 4 skulls on its perimeter has been found up here. It's about 480 meters north. So let's consider the images now, the depictions. So we have some measurements here of 117 meters, which is 384. Now in feet, now 384 is the salpinx, which is trumpet or war trumpet. We also have a measurement of 48, which is ram's horn. We have a measurement of 46 meters at the site, for 4.6 meters, which is doe or deer. We have a measurement of 5175, and that is a serpent or snake. 5178, the Hebrew number, is bronze, copper. We have some further measurements of 672, which is ox, cow, bull. We have the flock, the sheep, the gates, sheep, lamb, goat. We have 254, which is ass, donkey, and 390. These are all measurements you can find at the site. We have eagle, we have vulture, dog, we have lion, and in Jeremiah, there it speaks of an eagle as high as an eagle. So there's a register of all the numbers and the measurements that we have found at the site, bringing us to these animals. So let's now take a quick look at, if we take our arc ratio of 2.74 inside the earth, and we take the actual Bible's arc dimensions of 1.666, that is a difference of 1.07. Now that is the number of the beast. So what is it saying? It's saying that sin and evil is the wrong way, and this is what the Ark of the Covenant was designed to overcome. We also have, if we study this further, the Hebrew term H274 is yea, or grasp, and holds. And Greek is blamelessly and faultless, and held by God, set apart without blame before judgment. That's the idea of the theme that this is generating. Then we have 2740, which is burning anger, wrath. And 2740 in Greek is burning up, fire. Now when they entered Jericho, they burnt everything, because God doesn't want his people to have something that Satan or Baal created. If we consider the 2740, 2740 as absolute verse indexes in the Bible, it leads us to Genesis 11, Exodus 40:32, and Acts 13:37, which is about divine descent, the washing before the tent or the altar approach, and resurrection, no corruption. That has a supporting theme with our story of Jericho. Now, the Ark of the Covenant is 874. The gematria, the exact 874, the Holy of Holies, is 600. Exactly, 600 plus our 274. And that can lead us to the 60 myriads that Moses freed from Egyptian slavery at the start of the wilderness journey. We have a percentage calculation of 30.57, and 31 is all about conquest and completion. We're also led to a perimeter. We come back to this value of 343, which is 7 cubed. And 343 in the Greek terminology is uncover and reveal. And the Hebrew number 343 is great calamity. And there was a great calamity, and this is why Jericho needed recapturing and returning to God's people. So to round this up, the north and south poles of the earth and our measurements, the 70, the 274, 318, the ark comes before the Jordan. 874 is the ark in Hebrew gematria. So if we take another look at the poles and what measurements we can obtain from this, if we calculate the surplus with the North Pole, the 7777 minus the cordial distance, we have a surplus of 474. 474 is the Hebrew number for knowledge. Now, it is understood that the people back then, they took the Ark of the Covenant to be the knowledge. The Israelite people, they had the knowledge, and that's why everybody feared them, because you would be a fool not to fear God. So 474, I think the surplus is a very interesting number. I also find that the cordial distance between Tula and the South Pole is 104.30, and that brings us to 1 Samuel 4 verse 4. And there it speaks of the Ark of the Covenant and the cherubims that sit on the mercy seat. We have a gap surface arc minus the straight chord, which is a percentage of 1943. And this brings us to this passage. There is a gap ratio of 6.09%. In Joshua 6:9, this is where it speaks of the armed men went before the priests that blew with the trumpets and reward, and the rearward came after the ark. 318 is an interesting measurement, and a 30.57% or 31 brings us out to 318. Joshua 3:18, the priests that bear the ark and the covenant of the Lord. So the ark crossing, the inspection, and the completion. We also have some percentage calculations of 15, 16, 17, and 20. These percentages brings us out to the very key passages of the story, which is in Joshua 6, 15, 16, 17, and 20, where the final circuits, the shout, the devoted city, and the walls fall flat. So again, just another demonstration of how these percentages brings us to these passages. We also have a Earth surface triangle share of 22.04%. The 2204th passage in the Bible is this one, where Exodus 25:8, and let them make me a sanctuary so that I may dwell among them. And that was the tabernacle. We now have also a 19.43 percentage, which brings us the Hebrew number 1943 is ruin and disaster. And the Greek term 1943 is to cover, conceal, forgive. The absolute verse index of the Bible, 1943, is Exodus 15:22. And that speaks of the post-Red Sea wilderness road. So this is the journey after Moses parted the Red Sea. We also have a measurement of 3057. 3057 is spear or lance. And the 3057th passage in the Bible is Leviticus 13:4, where it speaks of where the priests examine a hidden condition that shuts the person up 7 days. We have 6:9 again. 248, the Hebrew number 248 is arm, strength, and power, and the Greek term 248 is support, treading, threshing, judgment imagery. So 248, this is the North Gap. So 24 million is the measurement in fingers of 474 kilometers. 343, calamity, disaster, we have looked at that. There is a measurement of 13 million on the North Chord and Royal Cubits. There's the number of routes they took around, the total circuits that they took around Jericho before the walls fell. So here's a little register of what we have found with the North and South poles. Now, when the ark parts, Joshua takes over from Moses, and the ark leads the way, crosses the Jordan, and parts the sea again for the second time. So there is a idea here with the pattern, the ark leads, the procession, the walls, and the inheritance. Let's consider now the Tula position in Mexico to Jericho. Tula to Jericho produces some interesting figures. We have 112 degrees in the center. We have a Sagitta measurement, a share radius of 44.4%. Now we've seen this number before, 444. It's also measured at the site. And there it is again, measured to Jericho, the actual location of Jericho on the earth. We also have a triangular area share disk of 147 or 14.7%. We have 1,525 nautical miles. We also have a 31.22%, bringing us to this idea, 147. 147 was the age of Jacob. So it's speaking of the lineage down from Jacob, who had the prophecy of Moses, down to Moses and Joshua. 153 is remnant, great catch, and 312 is rest, the Sabbath. I found if this is the North Pole, you're looking down on the earth now. This is Tula's location in Mexico, and this is the actual place in Jericho. We have a rotation, a short way rotation of 134 degrees. 135 brings us to 2.35 radians. It brings us to this passage here in Exodus 29:2, where it speaks of the finest wheat and flour. So it's about transitioning the story from destruction of the exterior walls to the holiness of the completed summit in the end. So the finest flour brings us to the parallelism with the idea of plastering the walls. 112.5 is to enter, to go in. 112 brings us out to Deuteronomy 112, where it speaks of how I can bear your problems and your burdens and your disputes all by myself. And we have a 6 million something feet surplus in that distance. And that brings us to Joshua 6:26, where it speaks, cursed before the Lord is the one who undertakes to rebuild the city, Jericho. So the right angle position between the pyramids and the plaza, the right angle. Like I said earlier, if you walk into a wall, what's going to happen to you? You are going to turn 90 degrees. So there is this procession wall Joshua 6 cluster. We have a percentage of 3.04%. Now we've seen this number before in the other study. It's come up before, 3.04 or 304. In fact, today it's 304 years ago since Easter Island was first discovered. And there is also 304,000 words in the 5 books of Moses, the Torah. It's 304,850 something. My memory serves me correctly. We also have a measurement of the 274, may bring us out to Deuteronomy 27:4. We have 3381. Now, the Greek term for Jericho is 2410. And that brings us 2410 meters. This measurement here doesn't just bring us to the Greek name of Jericho itself, but also to Hebrews 11:30, where it speaks of, by faith the walls of Jericho fell down. We also have a measurement of 1525 to enter, and 1526 is Gilgal. Gilgal was the very first station stop that Moses entered at the start of the wilderness journey. So we have where Jericho is named, the city is named. So 304%, this is the percentage between Jericho and the North Pole. It doesn't look like it, but if you calculate it, it is actually only 3% of the earth. We also have a measurement of 147, which is about the Levites being set apart. We have a 1031. 1033 is about the ark, the covenant that went before them. So we have an obedience line and an inheritance completion. With the chord, when you start using key numbers as dividing factors, if you divide the chord by 12, you get 1985. 1985 can bring us out to this passage in Joshua 19:51. These are the inheritance. So the inheritance for God's people is interesting because that was the whole point of the Ark of the Covenant story. So we brought to these passages where it speaks of do all his commandments and keeping his commandments and the redemption of the land. So we have the sevenfold, the 749, 343 idea. So the meridian zero, center of the earth, rotation to Tula, brings us out to these measurements and these passages and this idea. Now, 5606 is the collapse. 1120 is the breach. 2352, the fine flower, and the Lord and the dove, 801. The 112, if you convert to rads, arc minutes and arc seconds, we get some other interesting measurements. And we are brought 1120. The passage in the Bible is this one. So this is how you have broken through. Look at that, broken through. That broken through is quite a key alignment with the story of Jericho. So we have 13 circuits, 42 procession units. So the 13 produces fire and law endpoint, while 42 encompasses the triangular boundary to 300. Then we have some other measurements of 3,545 kilometers. Now, that is the Greek term for this word, nominos. So it's lawfully according to rule, and God has judged. 478. Let's have a look now at some Tula materials. In the story, there is silver, gold, brass, iron, stone, plaster. There's all these materials in the story. So we got silver, gold, brass, and iron, okay, in the story. So what do the materials do in the story? Okay, they are not destroyed in the city. They're separated from the ordinary, and they become a consecrated treasury material. So later on, they basically gift this to God. Once they recover Jericho, they take these materials and basically give it to God. Now, iron's atomic number is 26. Silver is 47. And gold, 79. And copper and zinc, which is bronze, 29 and 30. So there is a gold overlay in the arc identity. So we do have the northern eye-shaped cap is 12 meters by 35 meters. So it makes it a perimeter of 94. And that brings us out to inches, 3,700 inches. Now 3701 is silver, the Hebrew number for silver. So the northern eye-shaped cap, that is this location here. One of these caps on the eye shape is that. And then we have a southwest eye-shaped cap, which comes out at 108. And that's the atomic mass of silver. So silver now has two roots. We have found the atomic mass of 108. That's a number we've discussed several times before in the study. We've found 3701. So we've found two identifications of silver in the site measurements. We have a bearing of 198 degrees. Now, the atomic mass of gold is 197. 26 is the atomic number for iron. 56 for iron rounded atomic mass. And we have a Hebrew 1270 and 4604 for iron words. So we have found a 68 for the rough stone, the rubble, the destruction, and broken plaster columns, smooth summit. So we also have a calcium of 20 and a mass of 40. So there are consecrated metals enter the treasury. So H776 and G1093 for earth and land. So the clay mineral atomic targets only for composition is confirmed. So we have found silver twice. We've found gold once. We have the sun, which we're going to have a look at, the moon's arc precession, gold and silver G696. So the moon is 69.7 nautical miles is close. So we haven't looked yet at the moon and the sun. We're going to in a minute. If we consider Tula to Easter Island, we have these measurements here, 1045. The angle of 47 degrees is straight, but if you angle at the diagonal, it's 48. However, we have a distance, a northern distance of Easter Island to where Tula is of 3,257. That is 3,257. And there is a passage speaking of 300 cubits, and the 257 is arc. Or you may say it's 300 times 10 and the 257. So it's about the precession of the arc beginning. Then we have a measurement of 1,045 kilometers. And that brings us out to this passage on Joshua 6:4. 7 priests shall bear the arcs, 7 trumpets. Our diagonal line of 5,356 kilometers from Easter Island to Tula is 3328 miles. That distance, when divided by the ratio of 3:5 that the ark's designed at, the ratio of 2.5 by 1.5 is 3/5. Now when you divide that 5356 or 3328 miles, you get 2,000, which is the distance that they had to stay back from the Ark of the Covenant, unless you were a high priest like Moses, Joshua, Aaron, and the Levite priests that carried the Ark of the Covenant. So this is an example of how you get 3/5. Maybe this slide should have been before the other one. There's the 2,000 spacing. Our 787 is a measurement that's come up several times in the study. 787 is wall, the Hebrew number for wall. I found that quite interesting. 705, 706, again, is a wall frame. We have 48 degrees. I might just write that as the 48 palms distance around the Ark of the Covenant. But there is also an idea that this is a root angle which matches the Ark's top perimeter and handbreadths. 7626 is rod or tribe. Now Aaron's rod budded. Moses and Aaron both had rods of power. Okay, the trumpet fish. They could change into snakes. That's why the trumpet fish changes color, because It's trying to resemble a snake. It's the only fish that swims upright and has 54 scales along its body. 54 is the Hebrew number for rod. Now, Aaron takes his rod. When they get to Jericho, he casts his rod into the ground. He plants it into the ground, and it springs up into this great big tree of life, which is meant to heal and do all this magical stuff for God's people. Rod is 7626, which can be found from the 650 miles divided by the 300 cubit arc scale. Planting the tree or the rod would bring us to these numbers 4294 and 6086, and plant, which is 5193. Can we find these measurements? I bet we can. Now 2506 is demolition, and this can be found by multiplying it by 8 furlongs per mile. So to convert miles to furlongs, we get 2506, and that is portion or inheritance. And 2506 in Greek is pulling down. If we divide our diagonal distance in kilometers by 42, we get to a value, and the other one in miles, 650 divided by 42 in miles, we get again 155. So what it's showing is a preparation before the final wall fall action. Now Tula to Mount Sinai would also be an interesting part of the study, because Mount Sinai is the actual location where God gave Moses the 10 Commandments. We have a surplus of 1975, which is 7777 inches. So 7,777 inches is a surplus between Tula and actual location of Mount Sinai. We also have a 1067 and a 107. To me, 107, the number of the beast, the wrong way. It's all about choosing the right way, the wrong way. 107 is the wrong way, 106 is the right way. So to me, there is a play here between the wrong way and the right way when looking at these numbers. We also have a top view rotation of 133 degrees. Exodus 13:3, remember this day. So what does it bring us out to? The meridian rotations, remembrance, the 33, Moses turns aside, 12644, the route and the progression lane, the 7777, all to do with the 7 priests, the 7 trumpets, the 7 horns. We also have a Sagitta, or the depth of 2888. We have a 246, which is Midbar, wilderness support. 66, Exodus 6:6, is a deliverance and promise. Now, 22.66%, the Sagitta measurement, divided by the Earth's diameter, brings us out to 2266. And this brings us to this passage with the tabernacle pattern shown on the map. A rotation divided by the full circle, 3703, brings us out to this passage in Numbers 3:10, where Aaron and his sons appointed to the priest office. We have this theme going on here with this location. Remember this day, and I will bring you out, I will redeem you, and I will now turn aside and see this great sight. And the desert of the Sinai and the wilderness, part of the story. So there is also a surface arc conversions, which is law, holy oil, arc, staves, and the mercy seat. So we have these measurements bring us to a mercy seat, the sanctuary service, and consecration. So 107 reading warning or reversal lane. 316 needful, necessary. 316 the builders, the necessary service. 2266 the tabernacle pattern. 3703 Aaron and his sons get appointed to being high priests. If we break these numbers up into 10 and 670, the direct cordial distance, we have the law, the dividing lane, the unloading and the unburdening. I came across this number, which is 3669, and 5477, which is the Canaanites. Now the Canaanites are the children of the Canaanites ended up in Jericho. And Satan had something to do with Canaan. It wasn't just Eve who ate the apple, or the forbidden fruit, but Satan also hung around Canaan and got him to support him and change his ways and do evil, despicable things. And what happens at the end of the day? Their children ended up in Jericho, and now it was a mess. So God had to intervene and make sure it's returned to his people. We have some other measurements of 4, 3, 2, 1, bringing us out to Aaron was budded, and the blossoming of the tree of life. So there is a planting passage. There is Hebrew support of planting and life. So we have all these numbers that give us a final result of the measured path wins over the wrong path. Now let's consider the moon. In regards to the moon and Tula, if you plot Tula's position on the moon and then you measure the straight through the earth distances between Tula, it's the moon's north pole, the moon's south pole, you get some interesting measurements. Now this one here I find most interesting. The North Sagitta of 314. 314 is a critical verse in the book of Joshua. There is this idea of the same angles being mirrored onto the moon. Now 86 is the view of Earth when looking from the moon. If you're going to plot Earth's position from the moon, I believe that's correct. 86 is Elohim, God's name when it comes to righteousness and justice. And that is the central theme of the Ark of the Covenant. The 66, how it matches the Earth's tilt. Now, to explain this, there is a pole gap or a tilt between the Earth and the pole. Now, when the moon does 13 sweeps, it ends up with a gap. And if you take that gap and divide it by 360, you have so many cycles. Now we get this measurement of 408. This is not 480. This time we get a measurement of exactly 4.08 degrees. And 234, which is 13 sweeps and 18-fold cycles, 234. 1932, the Greek number, is to shine upon, to give light. Now we saw on Easter Island how measurements also brought us to this theme of giving off light. And the 1932nd passage in the Bible is holiness and wonders, the holy habitation. And 408 brings us out to Genesis 17, where it says, "This is my covenant, which ye shall keep between me and you." So this is God making a promise, and then Jericho, he's delivering that promise. 86, Elohim, God as judge. 8670 is Leviticus 16:15, where it speaks of the mercy seat. And the Greek number 861 is incorruption versus corruption. We also have a complementary angle of 3.3 degrees. Now 3.3 or 33, Jesus rose to heaven at the age of 33 because 33 has this theme of ascending. And that's exactly what the Israelites did. They ascended when they recaptured Jericho. So as the moon sweeps over, we got these 4 key measurements here at max, minimum, max, minimum. So we got 59, 66, and then coming around the other side, we got 114, 121. That's because the Earth's at a tilt. So when we consider 59, there is this day I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from off you. So this is God saying, I'm going to remove Egyptian slavery away from you. That's what God does for his people. 66, the Greek number is rage. Now, the people in Jericho were raging because they heard about this Ark of the Covenant, and they knew not to mess with it. And they heard that the Israelites were coming for them. So you could say that they were angry, all right? Baal's people were angry because the Ark of the Covenant was knocking on their door. You could also say that the River Jordan was raging. But it also brings us out to Joshua 6:6, where it gives the command to take up the ark. Then we have 114, and it brings us out to Joshua 114, which is, "Ye shall pass before the brethren as armed, all the mighty men of valor, and help them." 121 is Adam, or man. 316, where in the book of Joshua, speaking of the waters that rose up very far from the city of Adam, and the people passed over right against Jericho. So we have a list of interesting Tula moon measurements here. Now the cherubim and the wings over this is why there are wings and feathers on the Atlantean warriors. 2121, the moon surface arc brings us to opportunity for God's people. So obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. We have a measurement of 2613, bringing us to one cherubim on the end, out of the mercy seat, made he the cherubim. We have these measurements here of 10764, 3959. Can bring us out to these passages. Bring again the ark of the Lord your God. And then the Levites that serve and make the atonement. We have 343, which we've seen in this study, and a measurement of 314. 314 is a direct passage, the Sagitta measurement of between the moon, Tula, and the moon's north pole, straight through the earth, the distance between the highest point on the arc to the caudal line. Measurement is 314, where it speaks of the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people. And 343 can bring us out to this passage. We have 6:8, where the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets, in Joshua 6:8. We have some other measurements. This one of 5087, bringing us out to this passage. Ye shall walk in all the ways which the Lord your God hath commanded you. 258, which is Achad, which is one united people, and Moses' Israelites were united and go one way, one direction. So there is a recap of all these measurements we have with our moon, which brings us to the reproach and the way at Gilgal, leading the way, the ark, the ordered people, the mercy seat, the ark before the people, the priests and the trumpets, the cherubim, the accused, and the descent, commanded way mirror. Let's have a look finally now at Tula's position on the sun and the sun's measurements. So obviously these measurements here are quite bigger because the sun is so much bigger, but we still have some interesting measurements here. We have a surplus of 117, a south surplus of 442. So when we study these measurements, rotation 20.06, so we have a percentage value of 25.92%. Sun's Tula longitude rotation brings us out to this passage in Exodus 25:9, where it speaks of the pattern of the tabernacle. Make an ark. So this 798, this is very close to 800, which I measure, and the Ark of the Covenant can hold 808 liters. So we have this arc of 2592, a whole sun circumference. We also have a measurement here of 243, 850 kilometers, which brings us out to 2439 passage in the Bible, which is Exodus 31:18. So the commandments become written testimony placed within the ark. That passage there, 31:18, speaks of 2 tables of testimony written with the finger of God. Now the sun represents God, so that is an excellent matchup, I think, between the sun's Tula. So we have another 343, but this time it's in front of a 612. 612, 343 nautical miles can be broken into 612 and 343, which we've studied already and seen before. Then there is a alignment here directly with the mercy seat. So God's strength is not merely a force, it's mercy covering the covenant access. When we take the sun's latitude arc and we divide it by 6, we get 207. 207 is the gematria number for light. And God said, "Let there be light." The 612 brings us again to 612. And Joshua rose early in the morning and the priests took up the ark. So covenant is 612. Gematria 612 is covenant, the word. So we found a measurement of 257, and what we do is we take the north Sagitta of 125,707 kilometers. We convert that to short cubits. If we divide it by 11, which is the might and power of God, there we got 257, which is the gematria number for ark. We have a 1337, and it speaks of the inheritance. Now, the inheritance was the whole purpose of the ark. So you would expect the sun's measurements, which reflects God. There is a south surplus. When you divide it by 300, you get 654. So, again, referencing Joshua 6:5, speaks of the great shout before the fall of the wall. When divided by 13, here again we get 207 light. Now 723, another measurement, 7230588, is another measurement with the sun. They took them out and laid them out before the Lord. After Jericho, hidden sin must be exposed before the inheritance continues. Then we have a south surface arc of 1337. And that brings us to Joshua 13:7, where it speaks of divide this land for an inheritance. So again, a lot of references to inheritance. The conquest sequence ends in inheritance for God's people. 274, set up these stones and plaster them with plaster. 5606, which we've looked at, is clap and smite, strike together. We also have a 1038.81 nautical miles. And the Hebrew number 3881 is Levite. So to do a summary, what have we got here? We've got light, we've got the pattern, we've got the covenant, we've got the ark, the power of God, and Jericho wall fall theme. Now to end off with, we have to run a test, which I call it the BTI test, the Believability and Truth Index. This is a special test that tests your study. Now, I've taken and measured and explained in this to produce this video 3,434 measurements. And out of that, a supercomputer is coming back and telling me that I am correct 93%. So this is probably one of the highest scores that I've been given so far. And the BTI test is now on revision 3. It's been up-revised and it is very accurate. And let me tell you, it's very difficult to get a high score in this process. And this is the first time I've managed to get a study into the 90s. So I'm very proud of that. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Take care and bye-bye.